Hello there, YouTube. So, I want to talk about video games because I've been talking about books a lot on this channel and I like to shake it up a little bit. Now, I wanted to make this a mixed media channel where I talk about different things. So, I'd talk about books, I'd talk about gaming, I'd talk about tabletop role-playing, things along those lines. The thing is, I'm not engaging with all of those hobbies. I've not been engaging with tabletop role-playing anywhere near as much as I'd like because, COVID happened. And when everyone goes into lockdown for 18 months plus, you find that people aren't available to come round and play a tabletop game with you. So you can't have everyone gathering. You can't roll dice. You can't have the in-person experience, and that ruins that. Now, I've been playing some games of Dungeons and Dragons and that online. I've been using the Discord, which you can join below. It's in the description. I've been using that to host a couple of D&D games, and they've gone relatively well, but I say relatively. I have had many issues running online. Players unable to attend, players being late, time zone problems because I'm running for players across the world, but also I've had not a single game run without at least one player dropping out. Usually the starting lineup of players completely changes. I started with 12 players over 2 games, and I'm now down to 4 players in 1 game because players would just drop out and just stop showing up. And that happens a lot when you play online. People have very little in the way of commitment to the game. So if you're planning on running a long campaign, it doesn't really work. A statistic came out recently with Dungeons and Dragons that said that the average campaign only lasts for 6 sessions. Now that's depressingly low when you think about it. I run campaigns that are designed to last for around a year or more, playing each week. So I run with the intention of running between 40 and 50 sessions. My games are much more complex. I've had to abandon a lot of the storylines I was doing and combine everything together as the players I had left I've brought back together into 1 game. But even then, the players that I would play with in person, they can't play. Things have been an issue. People can't come because of the lockdowns. We've not been able to mix for a long time, and since lockdowns were lifted, people have either been out of work, so they don't have the money to be able to reasonably go to each other's houses regularly, or they're working way longer hours than they ever were before. So I have cancelled more games than I've run because people just can't make it. They're constantly at work. And this I think is an issue with just being an adult. I'm in my mid-30s now. Everyone I know is in their 30s, and when you're in your 30s, you have responsibilities. You have kids and jobs and careers and responsibilities, family members and things like that. Enough people I know either have an aging relative or a child or something like that they need to care for, a career they're looking at, they're in training or they're in some kind of education as well on the side, trying to stay competitive. There's a lot of things that get in the way. So many games have fallen by the wayside because of that. But you'd think video games would be different. Video games should be the one thing that should stay fairly constant, because you can play single player, and you can play online with a big long list of friends. You can just play with whoever's online at the time. So you should be able to play a lot of video games, and video games should have benefited from the fact that so many people were stuck at home. A lot of people were out of work on furlough, and a lot of people were stuck with grant money to keep them going, but nothing to really spend it on because their hobbies were effectively shut down. So even people who ended up with like a stimulus check, they would have found themselves with this check of money to spend, and they couldn't go out to bars, they couldn't go out to nightclubs, they couldn't play sports or travel or anything like that. So if they were people who drank, or if they had outdoor hobbies, or if they played sports, they watched sports, or they had any hobbies that required them to put a regular amount of money into this activity, that money wasn't being spent. Where did that money go? It went into video games. Loads of people bought consoles, loads of people started playing a lot more video games. Console sales were on the rise. Video games in general just saw a spike in playership. So did streaming TV, obviously, things like Netflix, Amazon Prime. They saw a huge influx of people watching them. The thing is, this should have been the time for video games to explode. This should have been the time that video games would reach this zenith where the very, very best would come out. But what actually ended up happening is video games have stagnated. Games haven't been coming out because of problems with the production of video games. People haven't been able to develop. The development studios have all been either furloughed or largely shut down. And you'd think that video games wouldn't be affected as much because surely people could just work from home if they've got a computer in their home. But it turns out that a lot of the stuff they needed to do actually requires extremely specialist equipment. Specialised computers, very expensive specialised computers with specialised software and multiple people working on the same thing in tandem. So actually, there's very little they could do. When you need like a full sound stage to be able to capture the sounds you need, when you need motion capture and you need actors in a studio doing these things, you can't really go any further. There's only so much you can do just sitting at a computer. So a lot of production ended up slowing down, which meant that the games that did come out came out with very little competition. They came out just as the only thing that was coming. And the disappointments that were 2020 and 2021's video games, how video games have progressed. There's always been enough games every year that you could make a solid top 10 best games and they'd all be gold. You really can't do that for 2020, and I doubt you're going to be able to do it for 2021. There's just not enough good games coming out. There's still one or two, but it's one or two, and it's not usually the big names. The big games are becoming more and more generic. They are recycling the same gameplay, the same ideas, the same aesthetics. They're doing the same thing over and over, and now they're trying to squeeze as much money out of people as possible. Microtransactions and DLC have been around for ages, but they're getting silly with the amount of loot boxes and microtransactions that modern games have. It's difficult to find a modern game that doesn't have them. So many games now would rather be a live service and try to addict you into the game. They don't just want you to play the game for 20 hours, enjoy it, and feel fulfilled. You've spent your money, you've bought the game, you play for 20 hours, you move on to the next game. That's fine. But they don't want that anymore. What they'd rather have is you spend the money to buy the game, play for 300 hours, get so invested that you play it online, or you play some endless version of the game where they can then sell you some kind of microtransaction, usually cosmetics, but it can be like XP grinder things to make it easier to level up and things like that. And then they'll sell you more and more of those things to try and keep you as a perpetual customer, spending £2 or £3 every month or $2 or $3 every month just to get a little bit more out of this game, just so that you can get that new hat or that silly little Arctic frog that'll follow you around or whatever the hell. And you can only play one or two of those, and ideally you shouldn't be playing any because they're not fulfilling games, they're addictive games. You're not playing them because you want to play them, you're playing them because you're addicted to them. When the gaming industry is almost completely focused on that style of game, that addictive gacha game, there's not a great deal to talk about, because either you're talking to the person who's played that one game and nothing else, or you're talking to someone who's either not touched it or played it for an hour and decided it's not for me, because you don't really get anything other than that. If you're talking about Genshin Impact, for example, I've played Genshin Impact for about 10 hours, and I didn't really get very far into it, and I spent 10 hours on it. I've got a feel for the game, and it's just a game. It's not really anything special. I could definitely see someone throwing themselves into Genshin Impact and enjoying it enough that they keep playing it just for the rote gameplay cycle. That minute-to-minute gameplay is junk food gaming. And I could see someone playing that and enjoying just that enough that they want to keep playing. But there's not enough there for me. But I'm not immune to it. I play games just like that. I played both the Division and the Division 2, and I put well over 300 hours into both. So I'm definitely not immune to that. I enjoy Monster Hunter World, which is very time sink heavy. And I play a lot of Path of Exile, which is a free-to-play, very time sink heavy game designed to be replayed over and over again, funded by microtransactions. So I'm not immune to this. I'm part of this system. I still play these games. But what it's meant is that gaming has been stratified, it's been separated out into various different communities. No longer is everyone playing the same 20 games, all for 20 hours apiece. They're playing sometimes just the one game to the exclusion of everything else. And if they're just going to play one, then there's no community around that anymore. There's just the single game community. So unless you're a single game channel, there's nothing really to discuss. And you'll notice that gaming YouTubers have struggled to find things to talk about. There's not as many discussion topics going on. There's not as many things to discuss. And another thing that's really hurting the gaming community at the moment, that's really dragging things down, is that this is impossible to find. This is, well, it's the controller for. I'm not going to grab the console because it's set up and it's fucking huge. But the PlayStation 5, I was lucky in that I was able to walk into a shop. I really should learn to mute Discord. Every time I start to record, I forget to mute Discord, and it will wait. It'll be 10 minutes of silence, and then everyone will start talking, and it'll beep throughout the last 5 minutes of the video. I know that I should just get up and mute it before I record, but I always forget. So yeah, the PlayStation 5. I was one of the lucky ones. I could walk straight into a shop and buy a PlayStation 5. I did exactly that. I walked in, I heard that they had a restock. They did have a restock. I got one. You can't do that anymore. I think I was one of only a very, very small select number of people who could do that. I managed to find the one weekend when it was possible to buy them in a shop. You've got to really jump through hoops to get them. And here is an article that I'm going to read from Push Square. PS5 stock shortages could last until 2023. You may not be able to readily purchase a PlayStation 5 until 2023, assuming demands hold up and material shortages for semiconductors persist. While Sony has stressed that it sourced the necessary components to meet its targets, the PlayStation 5 stock situation remains a real challenge around the world, with fans forced to pay close attention to retail websites in order to purchase next-gen platforms. The supply of chips will remain very tight until at least September next year, said Takeshi Kawabuchi, the director of Toshiba's semiconductor business. In some cases, we may find some consumers not being fully served until 2023. Toshiba plans to invest 60 billion yen, which is approximately $545 million, into supporting the production of semiconductors over the next 3 years, and may even build another factory to help meet demands. Kawabuchi actually specifically referenced video games, pointing out that games console makers are amongst the customers making the strongest demands, and that he's sincerely sorry for their frustration, as none of them have 100% satisfaction. So hardware could very well remain scarce through 2022 and beyond then. If you've not got a PlayStation 5 yet, hopefully you'll be able to get one soon. However, stocks are unlikely to meet demand until well into 2023. Yeah, I can well believe it. It's not just semiconductor shortages either. It's shortages across the board. When the pandemic hit and everything went into a lockdown, almost worldwide, it wasn't just the semiconductors that was a problem. Semiconductor shortages were already a problem before the pandemic. Now, manufacture worldwide has been disrupted, and infrastructure worldwide has been disrupted. Everything is having a shortage, even right down to paper. There has been a paper shortage, so much so that publishing houses are telling people if they want to buy books to make sure to order them 1 to 2 months early. And if you intend to buy a book in time for Christmas, you should have it ordered within the next couple of weeks. Because if you haven't bought it by the end of October, the chance of you getting it for Christmas is very slim. That's a paper shortage because the lumber industry was affected by COVID. There's also a cardboard shortage and a lumber shortage, which means packing crates and packaging cardboard is short to come by. There's been a big oil crisis and a natural gas shortage, which also means that there's a plastic shortage and a fuel shortage. It also means rising costs for electricity and heating, which means that factory overheads are going up. This is affecting every single industry worldwide. So it's not just the semiconductors, it's a shortage of everything. But it's also a price hike for everything, which is making almost anything impossible to get at this point. And every single industry is struggling. We are looking at a global catastrophe, a worldwide reduction in infrastructure and production. And we're looking at a crashing economy across almost every major built-up economy. So, yeah, this isn't going to be fixed anytime soon. And whilst there are way bigger issues to look at because of that, when we look at the gaming side of this, it means that something like a PlayStation 5 is a luxury most people can't find. I was genuinely lucky to get it, and I had to wait a while to get it. I wanted to get it at the beginning of 2021. I was originally going to be getting one as a Christmas present in 2020, but that couldn't happen. So I tried to get them early 2021. I didn't get mine until the beginning of the summer, I think it was, in 2021. And I was just lucky that I was able to get that. It seems that they're getting harder to find now. So that means that the gaming community is separated by system, by generation, and by game. We're starting to see gamers as a community stretched out and separated out. There's the PlayStation 5 owners, and there's the people who don't have a PlayStation 5. And if you're playing on PC, it's no different there, because you've got the people who can actually get hold or have already got hold of a high-end graphics card, and the people who have no chance because scalpers bought them all up. They still have the semiconductor shortage issue. Supplies are just not meeting demand. This I think is the thing that's going to be defining gaming for a while. I think that gaming as a hobby is no longer as integrated and interconnected as it used to be. Hopefully we'll be able to meet in the middle at some point. We'll be able to talk about more games and develop the community that used to be there. Because I do miss it. I miss the gaming community that used to exist. Go back to 2017, 2018, gamers and the gaming community was very vibrant, very interconnected. And that feels very much lost now. Maybe I'm alone. Maybe it's still out there, but I'm just not seeing it. If that's the case, I'd love to hear about it. Let me know. Comment below. Tell me what you think. I think another thing that's a big issue as well is that we don't really have any spokespeople, any journalists in gaming that speak for gamers anymore. All of the people who used to now are obsessed with identity politics. We've lost big names, like even people like Jim Sterling, who at the very least used to talk about gaming at least half the time and would rant about his politics the other half. Now it's entirely about how he has decided and deluded himself into thinking that he's now a woman. So Jim Sterling now spends the entire time moaning about his gender identity, and very little time talking about games, except to call out game developers for being evil because they're not woke enough for him. And that's Jim Sterling. He was one of the better people out there. Like, he genuinely covered topics that other people wouldn't touch. We don't have that anymore. Well, it's been nice chatting, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.